Welcome to another session of Lectures by Lob-EZ. I'm your host, Dr. Lob-EZ. Thanks for joining me today. Today's video, we're going to be talking about the conquest of the Aztec and the Inca empires. Okay, so we're going to get started talking about the Aztec, and we'll kind of pick up right on the aftermath of Columbus's arrival in the New World and the beginning of Spanish colonization of many of the islands in the Caribbean, including Hispaniola, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and others. And it was at this time that news reached the Spaniards that there was a very powerful empire that existed somewhere in Mesoamerica. And this empire, of course, was named the Aztecs. Okay, and they're going to kind of rise at the end of, or the beginning of the end of the Mayan civilization. They'll share some features. For example, their writing system, similar, not exact, but similar to one another, and their use of temples for religious purposes. So there's some overlap between those two civilizations. But the Aztec people were a very warlike tribe that grew through conquest. Okay, so it's very important to state that. Along with their proficiency with warfare, they were sophisticated in other areas. And this picture above shows one of their temples that they constructed. So this is going to indicate that they are have a advanced understanding of mathematics and engineering, to say the least. Okay, so go to this next slide here. If we want to look from a geographical standpoint, where they're located, kind of in central Mexico, near the present day border of or the capital city of Mexico, Mexico City, and that's where the Aztec people established their capital as well, Tenochtitlan, and it was selected because of like the defensive location. They decided to build an artificial island inside of Lake Texcoco, and that's where they built their capital, and conquered many of the territories that surrounded, and many of the indigenous people that surrounded them. Okay. Their emperor, their leader at the time of the arrival of the Spanish, is Montezuma II. I use a traditional spelling there. There are new spellings, a variety of them, and I was a little unsure, so I went with the more traditional spelling. Hernando Cortez is going to be the Spaniard who's responsible for coming into contact with them. He's going to have the title of a conquistador, okay? And so that's somebody of noble birth who came from Spain to seek his wealth in the New World, to seek adventure, conquest, things like that, okay? So he is responsible, he along with 450 other men go from Cuba into the interior of Mexico, searching for this tribe or this empire, the Aztec. They come into contact with a indigenous woman. We're going to call her an Amerindian. That's going to be a term used to describe the indigenous people, the natives that inhabit what we'll today call Latin America. So pretty much anything south of what is the modern day United States. We're going to call it Latin America. So anything in the Western Hemisphere, we'll call it Latin America. And the people, the indigenous people that are found there, are called Amerindians. Okay, At any rate, Cortez comes into contact with an Amerindia girl whose name is Malinke, and she was already fluent in a number of the native languages. And this is going to be very useful because after quickly learning Spanish, she avails herself to Cortez to be a translator, and she's going to be very instrumental in Cortez's ability to forge alliances with a lot of these native tribes that had been conquered by the Aztec. Okay, so once though, let me move so you can see this picture. Once Cortez comes into contact with Montezuma, pictured here, he is believed by Montezuma to be a god. The name is Quetzalcoatl. Because he had pale skin, white skin, and that was what the belief was, that Quetzalcoatl was a white-skinned god. And also, he and his men came in riding horses, and they had armor, and they had all sorts of weapons that the Aztec had never seen before. Okay, so let's be clear, the Aztec had no beasts of burden, no domesticated animals whatsoever. Okay, so the horse was completely foreign to them. So perhaps you can understand why they would mistake the Spanish for gods. So Cortez uses this opportunity to kind of ingratiate himself with Montezuma so that he could have the ability to get what he came for, and that was gold. Okay, and so once he and his men were discovered and found out for being thieves, that's where the conflict began in 1519. Okay, and so this is going to lead to 2 years of conflict between the Spanish and the Aztec. Okay, so despite being terribly outnumbered, 450 to at least 100,000, if not more, the Spanish were able to find success. There's 3 reasons why, and the first has to do with the advantage in superior weaponry. Okay, so the fact that they rode on horseback, that's going to count as like a superiority with weaponry or an advantage. The fact that they had metal armor, it's going to protect them against the primitive Aztec weapons. The fact that they had firearms, okay, and so that's going to include both muskets, or what is known as the harquebus, and then cannon, and then also they had some very sophisticated swords that the Spanish at this time were known for making some of the world's best swords. They were called rapier, R-A-P-I-E-R, rapier swords. So all of those are important to note, okay? And so when you counter that with the types of weapons that the Aztec had, you could see that they are rather crude by comparison, the Aztecs. And the type of armor or shields that they had are going to offer very little protection indeed, okay? So the number 2 reason that the Spanish are able to find success is because of this practice here, okay? I mentioned earlier they were able, with the help of Malinke, to forge some alliances with some of the tribes that had been defeated or conquered by the Aztec. But I think this picture here is important to see because what you're noticing is a human sacrifice. Okay, so those temples that I showed, or that temple that I showed you earlier, is where one of these human sacrifices would take place. Okay, and so they're cutting into the man's chest while he's still alive and pulling out his still beating heart, and that's going to be a burnt offering to keep the gods happy. Okay, and so as a conquered tribe, it would not be uncommon to be expected to pay tribute to your overseers, right? But typically that's in wealth. You know, usually you would make annual tribute payments to, you know, your overseers, as I said. And what's unusual, though, is that they had to pay tribute in human souls. They had to turn over people. So any conquered tribe had to offer people up for tribute. Okay, and so what that means is they're going to be the victims of human sacrifice. All right, and then the other thing that's noteworthy is the fact that sometimes, because it's believed that the Aztec had few or really no in domesticated animals, that they relied on some of those tributes to kind of add to their diet. Okay, so they practiced cannibalism. Okay, we know that, as far as farming is concerned, they grew maize. Okay, and so from a caloric standpoint, corn, they were able to get enough calories, but from a protein standpoint, their diets were deficient, and so there is proof of widespread cannibalism practice. So what that means is there's going to be no shortage of native people who are going to be willing to forge an alliance with Cortez, and so through the help of Malinche, he's able to do just that. And when the time comes, he's going to have 100,000 of his own soldiers to help fight against the Aztec. Okay. The third and probably most important reason why this lopsided victory was able to take place was because the diseases that the Europeans brought with them. They themselves weren't necessarily infected with the diseases, but the animals that they brought, the domesticated animals, the horses, the cows, the pigs. Okay, these are the types of animals that the natives didn't have. Okay, and so because of that, they had not been exposed to those types of diseases, and therefore never had an opportunity to build up immunities. Okay, so because of that reason, the Aztec and others got sick very quickly. Okay, and started to be wiped out. Okay, so the main disease is going to be smallpox, but there were other diseases, but that was the big one. Okay, smallpox. So they think estimates are that there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 million people in Latin America. Okay, so Mexico, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. By the time those diseases worked their way through, it claimed as many as 75% of the population's lives. Okay, so that's a terrible cost as far as human lives are concerned, but that's not all. Okay, by the time it's all said and done, I think in a later slide, you'll see that the total loss of life is somewhere in the neighborhood of 90%. So 90% of the indigenous Amerindians died either through disease, warfare, or just more generally mistreatment. Okay, the second empire that was defeated at the hands of the Spanish were the Inca. Okay, so the Aztec conquest was completed in 1521. This is going to happen about 10 years later, the Inca. Okay, so the Inca are located on the western most coast of South America. And what you notice when you look at this empire is that it's long and narrow. Okay, thousands of miles long, but only hundreds of miles wide. And that is because they're sandwiched in between the Pacific Ocean that you can see, but then also the Andes Mountains. And so they were, sort of prohibited because of the extent of the mountains that, prevented them from spreading further east. Okay. But despite that, they were well unified. Okay. And so what's noteworthy is that they were sophisticated road builders. They had to be for an empire that's thousands of miles long to remain connected. Okay. And so something else that's noteworthy is that they did not have written language. And since they didn't have written language, they had to rely on messengers to carry whatever the message was by word of mouth. Okay, and they had a sophisticated setup of like outposts and runners that would travel however many miles along a road to carry by word of mouth the message to the next messenger. Okay, so they were able to figure out a way to innovate and get around the fact that they didn't have written language. What they did have, though, and I don't know if you can see this here, written in knots is the title of this little picture here, this illustration. It shows that they used ropes to develop an intricate system of bookkeeping that they used for, I do know, for taking census or census taking, and then also for tax collection. And so this was a way for the state to count things, okay? So a variety of different ropes using different types of knots allowed them to have some type of record keeping, okay? And then the other thing that's noteworthy here is that they do have domesticated animals. Not many. This is the only, the llama, and then its smaller cousin, the alpaca. These animals are beneficial because they serve as pack animals. So the llama, the largest adult, it says, is 400 pounds. Can't be ridden by an adult. Can't pull a wagon because there's no invention of the wheel. But they could throw sacks over the back of the llama, and it could haul maybe 100 pounds. Okay, so they got some benefit out of it. They could eat it, they could consume the meat, and they could utilize the wool for clothing. Okay, but they never developed immunities from the alpaca and the llama, and that is because they did not place those animals inside their dwellings. So they never breathed the same air as the llama, and so there was less of an opportunity for them to be infected with any animal-borne diseases. And then secondly, they did not drink the llama's milk, which would have infected them, but didn't. Okay, so by the time the Spanish came, the Inca had already, it is believed, started facing the effects of European animal-borne diseases. Okay, so by the time Francisco Pizarro arrives in 1532, there's already some signs that they are suffering from, a pandemic. But the capital city is Cusco, and that's where Pizarro was headed because he found that there were stories of vast amounts of gold and silver in the Andes within the boundaries of the Inca Empire, and he wanted to get his hands on it. All right, and so he's going to utilize, to kind of make this brief, he's going to utilize the same tactics or very similar tactics to that of Cortez in defeating the Inca. Okay, so he's going to forge alliances with some of the people that have been conquered by the Inca. He's going to utilize sophisticated weaponry. And this comes to him by the benefit of reading Cortez's book. Okay, so by doing so, he learns about the strategies that he could utilize. Okay, and it's just noteworthy that the Inca don't have written language, so they don't have that benefit. They don't have the benefit of the wisdom of the ages being passed down. Like, I'm sure that Pizarro read more than just Cortez's book. I mean, he could have had the wisdom of lots of military generals or whatever experts to help him develop his military strategies. Okay, and so that's just an advantage of a literary society. That's one of the advantages of the literary society, that the Inca, quite frankly, didn't possess. Okay, so that's just a little context to help you understand that. And so by the time it's all said and done, this is the extent of Spain's overseas empire. You can see it will spread well into North America and a good deal of South America, and then all the way over here in the Philippines. So it's quite vast. Okay, that's all that we're going to discuss today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, right? See you next time. Bye.